Robert McClellan no longer rescued people. Now he rescued teddy bears from monsters under the bed. Sitting in his small kitchen in Plano, he watched through the window. His 4-year-old granddaughter Sophia was playing in the backyard. The little girl talked to imaginary friends by the old swing set. Robert smiled, remembering how his son Marcus had done the same thing 30 years ago. But everything was simpler then. Back then, he knew his role in the world. The Texas morning sun was already beating down mercilessly, though the clock showed only 8 a.m. Robert sipped coffee from a mug that read, "World's Best Grandpa." A gift from Sophia on his last birthday. The day he turned 58 and finally understood. His time as a hero was over. The phone rang sharply, breaking the morning silence. "Dad, I'm running late for work again," Marcus's voice sounded exhausted. Jennifer's lawyers moved the meeting. "Can you pick up Sophia at 5 instead of 4? Robert nodded, though his son couldn't see him. After Marcus's divorce, life had become one endless schedule of lawyer meetings. The custody battle for Sophia had been going on for 6 months now. "Of course, son. Don't worry about it." When Marcus hung up, Robert looked out the window again. Sophia had disappeared from view. He stood up quickly, his heart racing with an unfamiliar anxiety. In all his years as a firefighter, he had never been afraid for himself. But now, with responsibility for this little girl on his shoulders, fear had become his constant companion. Robert stepped into the backyard and saw Sophia by the fence. She stood motionless, staring at something beyond the wooden boards. Her small shoulders were tense, and her blonde hair gleamed in the sunlight. "Sophie, what's out there?" he asked, walking closer. The little girl turned to him. Her big blue eyes were filled with compassion and concern. Such an expression didn't belong on a 4-year-old child. "Grandpa Robbie, there's a doggy. He's hurt and really scared." Robert approached the fence and peered through the gap between the boards. Beyond the fence, under the shade of an old oak tree, lay a pit bull. The dog was large, with gray coloring and white patches on his chest. His right paw was tucked against his body, and a scratch was visible on his side. The animal was breathing heavily, tongue hanging out. But what struck Robert most were the dog's eyes. They looked directly at him. In that gaze was exhaustion, pain, but no aggression. These were the eyes of someone who had seen much and lost trust in the world. "He's hungry, Grandpa," Sophia whispered. "And he hurts." Robert knew everything about pit bulls that the news told. Aggressive, dangerous, unpredictable. But this dog didn't look threatening. He looked like a soldier after a hard battle. Defeated, but not broken. "Sophie, go to the house," Robert said quietly. "Grandpa needs to think about what to do." The little girl didn't move. She continued staring at the dog through the gap in the fence. Her small hand reached toward the boards, as if trying to reach the animal. "He's not bad, Grandpa. I know it." Robert placed his hand on his granddaughter's shoulder. Throughout his life, he had learned to trust his instincts. In fires, instinct meant the difference between life and death. Now his instinct was telling him the same thing Sophia was saying. This dog posed no threat. But instinct also reminded him of that last fire. About the young woman he couldn't save. About how trusting your own abilities could turn into tragedy. The dog slowly raised his head and looked at them again. In his eyes, Robert saw something familiar. The exhaustion of a warrior who could no longer fight. The loneliness of someone who had lost their purpose. "Come on, Sophie. Let's go to the house for now." As they walked back to the kitchen, Robert felt something had changed. The appearance of this dog was no coincidence. In his life, which had seemed meaningless and empty for the past few months, a new mystery had appeared. He didn't yet know that this wounded pit bull would become a bridge between his past and future. Between the hero he had been and the protector he was destined to become. The morning heat was building, and somewhere in the distance, thunder rumbled softly. Storm clouds were gathering on the horizon, though the sky above them remained clear. Robert had learned to read weather signs during his firefighting years. This afternoon would bring rain. He looked back toward the fence where the injured dog lay waiting. Something about the animal's patient stillness reminded him of himself during those long hours between emergency calls. The quiet watchfulness of someone trained to respond when needed. But those days were behind him now. Or so he had thought until this morning, when a little girl's compassion had shown him that perhaps his time as a protector wasn't over after all. The decision came to Robert like muscle memory from his firefighting days. Swift, instinctive, without second guessing. He found an old towel in the garage and filled a bowl with water. Sophia watched from the kitchen window as he approached the fence. The pit bull hadn't moved from his spot under the oak tree. His breathing was labored but steady. "Easy, boy," Robert spoke softly, the way he used to calm accident victims. "Nobody's going to hurt you." The dog's ears perked up at the sound of his voice. Those intelligent brown eyes followed Robert's every movement. There was wariness there, but also something else. Hope, maybe. Or just desperate thirst. Robert set the water bowl near the fence and stepped back. The dog watched him for a long moment before slowly rising to his feet. His right front paw barely touched the ground. Each step was measured, painful, but determined. The pit bull approached the water cautiously, never taking his eyes off Robert. When he finally lowered his head to drink, his tail gave a barely perceptible wag. It was such a small gesture, but it hit Robert unexpectedly hard. Thunder rumbled closer now. The storm clouds were building faster than he'd anticipated. In Texas, summer storms could turn violent quickly. This dog needed shelter, and soon. But Robert hesitated. What did he know about caring for an injured animal? What if he made things worse? The last time he tried to save someone, a young mother trapped in a burning apartment, his judgment had failed catastrophically. The memory hit him like a physical blow. Third floor, smoke so thick he could barely see his own hands. The woman's voice calling for help, getting weaker. He'd made the wrong choice about which wall to breach. By the time they reached her, it was too late. "I should have known," he told the captain afterward. 30 years on the job, and I still got it wrong. That was 6 months ago. His last day as a firefighter. His last chance to be a hero. Now Sophia appeared beside him, her small hand slipping into his. She studied the pit bull with the serious concentration only children possess. "He likes you, Grandpa. Look how he's watching you." Robert looked. The dog had finished drinking and was indeed watching him intently. There was something almost human in that gaze. Intelligence, certainly. But also judgment. As if the animal was trying to decide whether this man could be trusted. "His name is Duke," Sophia announced matter-of-factly. "How do you know that, sweetheart?" "He told me. Not with words, but I know." Robert almost smiled despite the gravity of the situation. Children and their certainties. But looking at the dog again, he had to admit the name seemed to fit. There was something noble about the animal's bearing, even in his injured state. The first fat raindrops began to fall. Duke looked up at the darkening sky, then back at Robert. The message was clear, time was running out. Robert made his second instinctive decision of the morning. He opened the gate. Duke limped slowly into the yard, his movements careful and deliberate. He stopped about 10 feet from Robert and Sophia, close enough to accept their help but far enough to bolt if needed. Smart dog. "That's it, Duke," Sophia whispered. "You're safe now." The rain began in earnest, large drops spattering the dusty ground. Robert guided Duke toward the covered patio behind the house. The dog followed willingly, his trust growing with each step. Under the patio roof, Robert got his first close look at Duke's injuries. The scratch on his side was superficial, probably from barbed wire. But the front paw was swollen, possibly sprained or worse. The dog was also thin, his ribs visible beneath the gray coat. He'd been on his own for a while. "We need to clean that cut," Robert said, more to himself than to Sophia. "And get some food in him." As if understanding, Duke settled down on the patio floor with a soft grunt. He rested his head on his good paw and watched Robert with those expressive eyes. Waiting. Trusting. The storm was intensifying now, rain drumming steadily on the roof. Robert felt a familiar tightness in his chest. In his firefighting days, storms like this meant emergency calls. Car accidents on slick roads, trees down on power lines, flash floods in low-lying areas. But he wasn't a first responder anymore. He was just a grandfather with a granddaughter and an injured dog, waiting out a Texas thunderstorm. Yet something about this moment felt significant. Like a test he hadn't known he was taking. Duke's presence wasn't random. Nothing in Robert's life had felt this purposeful since his retirement. He just wasn't sure yet what that purpose might be. The storm hit with typical Texas fury. Rain pounded the roof like machine gun fire. Lightning split the sky every few seconds, followed by thunder that shook the windows. Robert had found antiseptic and bandages in the bathroom. Duke submitted to his ministrations with remarkable patience, only flinching slightly when Robert cleaned the cut on his side. The dog's trust was both humbling and terrifying. "You're being very brave, Duke," Sophia said, stroking the dog's head gently. Duke's tail thumped weakly against the patio floor. Robert wrapped the injured paw carefully. Not perfect, but it would do until he could get Duke to a veterinarian. The dog tested the bandage, putting a little weight on the paw, then looked up at Robert with what could only be described as gratitude. The power flickered, went out, came back on. Robert's cell phone buzzed with a severe weather warning. Tornado watch until 8 p.m. Flash flood warning for low-lying areas. "Grandpa, I need to check on Muffin," Sophia announced suddenly. Robert's blood went cold. Muffin was Sophia's stuffed elephant, currently residing in the playhouse at the far end of the yard. The playhouse that sat in the lowest part of the property, where water collected during heavy rains. "Sophie, no. Muffin will be fine. The water won't hurt a stuffed animal." But when he turned around, Sophia was gone. The patio door stood open, rain blowing in through the screen. "Sophia," he shouted, his voice lost in the thunder. Duke was on his feet instantly, alert and focused. The dog limped quickly to the door, looked out into the storm, then back at Robert. His message was unmistakable: "We need to go. Now." Robert's training kicked in, but his mind screamed panic. In the storm's fury, he could barely see 20 feet. Sophia was 4 years old, alone in weather that could kill grown men. This was his nightmare all over again. Another person depending on him. Another chance to fail catastrophically. "Sophia. Where are you?" Duke pushed past him into the storm, moving with purpose despite his injured paw. The dog paused, looked back to make sure Robert was following, then headed straight for the backyard's far corner. Robert stumbled after him, rain stinging his face like needles. The ground was already saturated, water pooling everywhere. Lightning illuminated the yard in stark, terrifying snapshots. Duke reached the playhouse first. It sat on slightly raised ground, but water was already lapping at its base. The dog circled the small structure, whining softly. "Sophie! Are you in there?" No answer. Robert's heart hammered against his ribs. Where could a 4-year-old go in weather like this? The fence gates were latched. Unless she'd found another way out. Kids were resourceful, especially when scared. Duke suddenly lifted his head, ears pricked forward. He'd caught something Robert couldn't hear over the storm. The dog started moving again, heading toward the creek that ran behind their property line. The creek that would be a raging torrent by now. Robert's legs felt like lead as he followed Duke through the driving rain. Every step took them farther from safety, deeper into the kind of nightmare scenario that had ended his career. But Duke moved with certainty, following some trail only he could detect. His injured paw left bloody prints in the mud, but he didn't slow down. They found her huddled against the storm-drained culvert, 50 yards downstream from the house. Sophia sat in water up to her waist, clutching Muffin to her chest. Her lips were blue, her small body shaking uncontrollably. "Grandpa," she cried when she saw him. "I got scared. The water got so deep so fast." Robert waded into the rushing water without hesitation. This time, he wouldn't be too late. This time, his judgment wouldn't fail. Duke positioned himself upstream, his body creating a barrier against the current. The dog's intelligence was stunning. He understood exactly what needed to happen. Robert reached Sophia and lifted her into his arms. She was so cold, so small. But alive. Breathing. Safe. "I've got you, sweetheart. Grandpa's got you." The walk back to the house felt like miles. Duke limped beside them, never leaving their side. When they reached the patio, the dog collapsed, exhausted but vigilant. Inside, Robert wrapped Sophia in warm towels and called Marcus. The conversation was brief, punctuated by Sophia's chattering teeth and the storm's continued fury. "Dad found me," Sophia told her father over the phone. "And Duke helped. Duke saved me too." When she hung up, she looked at Robert with those serious blue eyes. "You were scared, weren't you, Grandpa?" Robert nodded, not trusting his voice. "But you came anyway. That's what heroes do." Outside, Duke lay on the patio, watching over them through the glass door. His tail wagged slowly when he saw Robert looking. For the first time in 6 months, Robert felt like himself again. Not the man who'd failed to save a life, but the man who'd spent 30 years running toward danger when others ran away. Duke had reminded him who he really was. A protector. A guardian angel in human form. And sometimes, angels came with 4 legs and battle scars. The storm passed as quickly as it had arrived, leaving behind the clean, washed smell of Texas after rain. Sophia slept deeply on the couch, wrapped in blankets and exhaustion. Duke lay on the floor beside her, his head resting on his good paw, eyes tracking Robert's every movement. Robert sat in his recliner, watching them both. His hands had finally stopped shaking. The adrenaline was gone, replaced by a deep, bone-weary tiredness he remembered from his firefighting days. The good kind of tired. The kind that came after lives were saved. Marcus had called 3 times since the storm ended. He'd wanted to rush over immediately, but Robert had talked him out of it. The roads were still flooded, and Sophia was safe now. Sleeping peacefully for the first time in weeks, it seemed. "She's been having nightmares," Marcus had explained during his last call. "Ever since the divorce proceedings started. The lawyers, the custody evaluations, all of it. She thinks it's her fault somehow." Robert looked at his granddaughter's peaceful face. 4 years old, and already carrying burdens that belonged to adults. No wonder she bonded so quickly with a wounded dog. They recognized each other, two souls trying to heal from damage they hadn't caused. Duke shifted slightly, careful not to disturb Sophia. His bandaged paw was elevated on a small pillow Robert had provided. The dog's breathing was easier now, his body relaxed for the first time since Robert had found him. Outside, the evening light filtered through clearing clouds. The worst was over. For the storm, anyway. Robert's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. The message was simple: "Is my dog okay?" His heart skipped. Duke's owner. Someone was looking for him. Robert studied the sleeping pit bull. Duke's collar was worn leather with no tags, but clearly he belonged to someone. Someone who cared enough to search for him. Another text appeared: "Gray pit bull, white chest markings. Goes by Duke. He's been missing 3 days." Robert typed back, "He's safe. Injured but treated. Where are you?" The response came quickly: "Fort Worth. Can I come get him? I'm Maria Santos. He's my service dog." Service dog. That explained Duke's remarkable intelligence, his calm demeanor around Sophia, his instinctive understanding of what needed to be done during the crisis. Robert looked at Duke again, seeing him with new eyes. This wasn't just a stray dog. This was a highly trained animal with a specific job. Someone needed him. Someone was probably lost without him. But even as Robert typed, "Yes, come whenever you can," he felt a hollowness growing in his chest. Duke had been with them less than 12 hours, but already the house felt more complete with him here. Already Robert had started imagining longer conversations with Sophia about caring for animals, about responsibility and compassion. Already he'd started feeling useful again. Duke must have sensed his conflicted emotions. The dog lifted his head and looked directly at Robert. Those intelligent brown eyes held understanding. He knew what was happening. Service dogs were trained to read their handlers' emotions, to anticipate needs before they were expressed. Duke gave a soft whine, then gently licked Sophia's hand where it dangled from the couch. An hour later, Maria Santos stood in Robert's living room, and everything made sense. She was young, maybe 30, with the bearing of someone who'd seen combat. Her left leg was a prosthetic, visible below her rolled-up jeans. When Duke saw her, his tail wagged so hard his whole body wiggled, but he didn't leave Sophia's side until Maria gave a subtle hand signal. Then Duke was in her arms, and Maria was crying into his gray fur. "I thought I'd lost him," she whispered. The fireworks on the 4th of July spooked him. He broke his leash and ran. "I've been searching everywhere." Robert understood. PTSD. Fireworks could trigger flashbacks for veterans, and apparently for their service dogs too. Duke had been running from invisible demons, just like Robert had been running from his own failures. "He saved my granddaughter today," Robert said quietly. "Led me right to her when she got trapped in the flood." Maria looked up. Tears still streaming. "That's what he does. He finds people who need help. It's not just his training, it's who he is." Sophia had awakened during the reunion. She watched with the solemn acceptance children sometimes displayed when adults made decisions they couldn't control. "Will Duke be happy now?" she asked Maria. "Yes, sweetheart. Very happy. But I think he'll miss you too." Maria knelt beside Sophia. "You know what? Duke and I live just an hour away. Maybe sometimes, if your grandpa says it's okay, we could visit." Sophia's face lit up. "Really? Duke could come back?" "Service dogs need friends too," Maria said, smiling. "And I think Duke has found some very special friends here." As they prepared to leave, Maria turned to Robert. "Thank you. For taking care of him. For understanding what he needed." Robert nodded, not trusting his voice. He'd found something today too. Purpose. The knowledge that his protecting days weren't over, just different now. Duke paused at the door, looked back once, and Robert could have sworn the dog winked at him. 3 weeks later, Robert stood in his backyard, watching Sophia teach Duke how to play fetch. The dog's paw had healed completely, and he moved with the fluid grace that had been hidden beneath his initial injuries. Maria sat in a lawn chair nearby, laughing at her service dog's obvious delight in being, for once, just a regular dog. The custody situation had resolved itself in an unexpected way. Marcus and Jennifer, seeing how the storm incident had affected their daughter, had agreed to joint custody without further legal battles. "She needs stability more than she needs us to be right," Marcus had told Robert. "And she needs you." Robert had become Sophia's primary caregiver during the week, while she spent weekends alternating between her parents. The arrangement worked. Sophia's nightmares had stopped. She slept peacefully in the little bedroom Robert had set up for her, the one with glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling and a framed photo of Duke on the nightstand. "Watch this, Grandpa Robbie," Sophia called out. She threw a tennis ball across the yard. Duke retrieved it, but instead of bringing it back to her, he carried it to Robert. "He thinks you need to play too," Maria explained, grinning. "Service dogs are excellent at reading what people need, even when they don't know it themselves." Robert took the slobbery tennis ball and threw it again. Duke's tail wagged as he bounded after it, his joy infectious. When had Robert last felt this light? When had laughter come so easily? The answer surprised him, not since before his last day as a firefighter. Not since before he'd started doubting everything about himself. But doubt was a luxury he couldn't afford anymore. Sophia needed him to be certain. Strong. Present. Maria had become a regular presence in their lives. She'd started bringing Duke for weekend visits, and somehow those visits had extended into dinners, then evening conversations on the patio. Robert found himself looking forward to her insights about trauma, healing, and the long road back to trusting yourself again. "You know," she'd said the previous weekend, watching Duke and Sophia build a blanket fort, "service dogs don't just help their handlers. They help everyone around them remember what unconditional love looks like." Robert had been thinking about that conversation all week. About love without conditions, acceptance without judgment. About second chances and new purposes. Today, Maria had news. "I've been talking to the VA hospital in Dallas," she said, settling back in her chair. "They're starting a program pairing retired firefighters and police officers with veterans who have service dogs. Mutual support. Mentorship." She paused, watching his reaction. "They asked if I knew anyone who might be interested in helping out. Someone with experience in emergency response, but also someone who understands what it means to rebuild after things don't go the way you planned." Robert felt something shift inside his chest. A door opening that he hadn't even realized was closed. What would that involve? Sharing your story. Listening to theirs. Maybe helping train new service dog handlers. Showing them that having a rough day, or even a terrible failure, doesn't disqualify you from being a hero. Sophia ran over, Duke at her heels. "What's a hero, Maria?" Maria smiled, but her eyes were on Robert. "A hero is someone who shows up when people need help, even when they're scared. Even when they're not sure they can fix everything." Sophia nodded seriously. "Like Grandpa Robbie in the storm." Exactly like Grandpa Robbie in the storm. That evening, after Maria and Duke had gone home, Robert sat on his patio watching the sunset paint the Texas sky in shades of gold and pink. Sophia was inside, coloring a picture of Duke that she planned to mail to him. His phone rang. "Marcus. Dad, I wanted to thank you again. For everything. The way you've stepped up with Sophie, the stability you've given her. I don't know what we would have done without you. Robert watched a hawk circle lazily overhead. She's given me more than I've given her, son. What do you mean? Purpose. A reason to get up in the morning that matters. Robert paused. I'm thinking about volunteering with veterans. Helping them transition. Using what I learned from my own transition. There was silence on the other end, then Marcus's voice, thick with emotion. That sounds perfect, Dad. That sounds like exactly what you should be doing. After the call ended, Robert remained on the patio as darkness fell. Sophia emerged with her finished drawing and climbed into his lap. Together, they watched the first stars appear. Grandpa, do you think Duke knows he's a hero? Robert considered the question seriously. I think Duke knows he has a job to do. Taking care of people. Making sure they're safe. And I think he's happy to do it. Like you. Like me. The words felt true in a way they hadn't for months. Like both of us. Sophia snuggled closer. I'm glad Duke got lost that day. Robert kissed the top of her head. Me too, sweetheart. Me too. Above them, the stars wheeled in their ancient patterns, constant and reassuring. Guardian angels came in many forms, Robert had learned. Sometimes they had wings. Sometimes they had 4 legs and patient brown eyes. And sometimes they were small girls who saw clearly what adults missed, that being broken didn't mean being worthless, and that the greatest gift you could give someone was the chance to be needed again.